أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the beginning of week 3, Monday's class. Jazakumullah for arriving on time and waiting very patiently for us to start the class. As you can see, today we'll be following the usual format of our opening assembly, and our rule today is going to be tashdid. We'll go on to do our practice text, which is Surah Al-Bayyinah, and then we have 3 letters of the day before we continue with our practice. And then we'll end in our usual way, inshallah, with the assigning of homework and dua. Okay, so if I may have a student to the mic for our opening dua.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. Our first student is G2166.
G2166. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, darling. How are you?
Chico.
Alhamdulillah. Okay, sweetheart. So repeat with me. Everybody at home also follow along with us. We always start by asking Allah to assist us in our learning. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
رب اشرح لي
رب اشرح لي
رحلي صدري
صدري
ويسر لي
ويسر لي
أمري.
أمري.
Well done, darling. Okay, and then the English translation here.
Lord, expand my mind and make my task easy for me.
Well done. And the reference?
26:27.
Well done. Doha. Okay. Jazakumullah for coming to the mic, darling. Inshallah, we'll call you again at another point.
Okay,
Allah Hafiz, darling. Okay, so let's move on. Oh, okay. Bear with me. Let me now just share my PowerPoint. So let me just play from the start. Okay. So today's rule, let's go straight into it. Okay, today's rule is tashdid. So it's a new word. Lots of you will have heard it before, but let's just go back to the beginning and start fresh. Shadda. Shadda is another name for tashdid. You'll often hear teachers and parents and other people talking about tashdid or shadda. If you hear either word, they basically mean the same thing. Okay, so don't get confused if suddenly I start saying tashdid or I say shadda or another teacher uses those terms. They mean the same thing. Okay, so what is shadda? Let's find out. Okay, a shadda looks like this small W sign that's sitting on top of a letter here. And as you can see, it sits on top of a letter. Now, when a letter carries a shadda, it is known as mushaddad. A mushaddad letter is a letter that carries a shadda. So this jeem here, okay, the blue jeem with the W sitting on top of it, that is known as a mushaddad jeem. Okay, so what does a shadda do? A shadda causes joining of letters. Let's look at how this joining happens. And we'll look at this example on your screen. And let's take a look at this part first. And notice that there's a sin with a dhamma on it and a jeem with a shadda. And let's remind ourselves of some things that we learned last week. Okay, as well as what we're going to do, whoopsie-daisy, today. A mushaddad letter, as I've just said, is a letter that carries a shadda. So in that circle, that jeen is carrying a shadda. That's a mushaddad jeen. A vowed letter is a letter that carries a stroke. So in that circle, that seen, which is carrying a dhamma, that's a vowed letter. It's a muttaharik letter. If you remember, we said muttaharik and vowed mean the same thing. So we have a vowed seen and a mushaddad jeen there. Okay, now a mushaddad letter joins to the most recent vowed letter. And this means that this jeen is going to join to the seen, and it will make a sound like this. Suj, suj. When you read, you'll have to make sure that both the seen and the jeen, or whichever letters that are joining, both of them have to be sounded. They both have to join. Now, just to make sure that we're looking at the right thing, it's that jeen and that seen that are joining. Now, that jeen also has a kasra on it, okay? And so when we read this combination, we do the joining of the jeen with the seen, suj, and then we bring the kasra into play and we say sujji, sujji. And we have to make sure that we press down on the mushaddad letter and we emphasize it. We don't rush through it. So if you listen, sujji. Now, if we look at the word, okay, if it will just stay on my screen. Okay, so if we look at this word here in the circle, when we read this, we will say sujjirat, sujjirat. We don't rush through on a mushaddad letter and we press down on it. Now, some of you will be thinking this looks very much like something we did last week to do with the sukoon and the sakin letters. And you'd be right, because everything that I've said applies essentially almost to the sakin rule that we introduced last week. So let's answer that question by looking at this example here, okay, and ask ourselves, what is the difference between sakin letters and mushaddad letters? Well, in Arabic, instead of writing the same letter twice in succession, which means if you have two letters which are the same and they're falling one after another, instead of writing them twice, we in Arabic write them just once and a shadda is placed on the top. So here, where you see the red jim with the shadda on the top, there's actually two jims there. You can only see one, but the shadda is telling you that there are two jims there. And because there's two jims there, that's why we have to press down, because we have to make enough sound that two jims would make. We have to press down and emphasize that sound. Now, the important thing to remember when it comes to mushaddad letters is, and this is the most important thing, is that you must press down on them and you must not rush through them because there are two letters there. Okay, so mushaddad letters are not actually difficult to read properly, and we need to follow just 4 simple steps in order to be able to cope with basically any occurrence of tashdid in the Quran Majid. And the first step is to identify the mushaddad letter and the vowed letter that's going to be joined. So if we look at that example there, okay, we have to see that there is a mushaddad dal. We have to find the vowed letter that it will join to. So we work backwards and then we find that there is a vowed letter just before it, the ba. The ba carries a fatha. So it's a vowed letter. The ba and the dal are going to join. And the second step is basically just to join those letters and ignore any stroke that happens to be with the mushaddad letter. In step 2, you just join the mushaddad letter to the vowed letter. So here we would say bud, bud. The next step would be to look at the stroke that's on the mushaddad letter. Here it happens to be a kasra. So we make that sound, D, D, for 1 second because it's a kasra. Once we've done that, we put everything together and we say bud, D, bud, D. And the important thing to remember is to press down on the mushaddad letter, to emphasize the sound and not to rush through it. So if we were to look at this word here, we've already practiced the badi, which occurs within it. So when we read this, we'd say nu badi la, nu badi la. And it's as simple as that. 4 simple steps to cope with any occurrence of tashdid that you will see in the Quran Majid. And sometimes you will see a tashdid and then the next letter carries a tashdid, but you follow these simple steps for every single occurrence and inshallah you'll be fine. Okay, so that being said, let me now go to my PDF and we can then practice. If you just bear with me, let me find, here we are. Okay, let me just get that back. Okay, so let me go here. Just let my computer catch up. Okay then, so let's go to the right screen. And if I may have a student to the mic, please.
Yes. G2149, will you please unmute yourself?
G2149, Assalamu alaikum. G2149, Assalamu alaikum. Okay, if you could try somebody else and we can maybe come back.
G2159, will you please unmute yourself?
G2159, Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
How are you, darling?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, very well. Jazakallah for asking. Okay, so see how we've done this first example when I was teaching. Okay, so let's look at here. Okay, we're going to notice that there is this W sign on top of the bar. What does that tell us about the bar? What can we call that bar?
It's a tashdid letter.
It's a tashdid letter, or you can say mushaddad letter. Okay, so this is a mushaddad bar. As soon as we see a mushaddad letter, we know that there's going to be joining, and it has to join with a voweled letter that comes beforehand. What do you think it will join with?
The kaf.
Well done, yes, because the kaf carries a kasra. So the first step is we identify the mushaddad letter and the voweled letter. Then what we do is step 2, which is simply to join those 2 letters. And we'd say gib. So repeat with me. Well done. We ignore the stroke that sits on top of the mushaddad letter for now. We just do the gib. The third step is to then look at this stroke, which happens to be a tanween, and then we make the right sound. So here we make the general sound for a tanween, which is ban.
Gibban.
Well done, yes. So after we've made the right sound for the tanween, we then put everything together. We say gibban, and we make sure that we stay with the bar just for a fraction of a second so that we've pressed down on it. So then when we come to this, where we've got that word that we just practiced for the letters, it becomes much easier. So we can say mukibban.
Mukibban.
Well done. Press down on the bar just for a fraction of a second longer. Mukibban.
Mukibban.
Mashallah, perfect. Okay, so let's move on to this one here. There is a tashdid here on top of the Ra. What is that letter known as?
Mushaddad letter.
Well done, Mushaddad Ra. We know Mushaddad letter joins to a vowel letter that comes beforehand. Which letter will it join with?
The Ba.
Well done, because the Ba carries a dhamma, it carries a stroke. So the first step is to identify the two joining letters and ignore any stroke that's with the Mushaddad letter. We're going to make it nice and simple for ourselves. So we make the sound Bur.
Bur.
Well done. And then the third step is we look at the stroke on the Mushaddad letter and we make that sound Ri.
Re.
Well done. And then we put it all together. Burri.
Burri.
Well done. And we have to remember just to make sure that we emphasize on the Mushaddad letter because there's two of them there. So here we would say Burrizat.
Burrizat.
Well done. Okay, here. Mushaddad waw, it will join with, what do you think?
The Sin.
Well done, because the Sin is the most recent vowel letter next to this Mushaddad waw. So the first step is to identify, and we ignore any stroke on the Mushaddad letter, okay? We just join the two sounds. Sav.
Sav.
Well done. Then we bring the stroke into play. We say vi.
Vi.
And then we put everything together. Sav. Vi.
Savi.
Well done. And we make sure we press down on the vowel. Savi.
Savi.
Mashallah. And so when we come here, Nusaviya.
Nusaviya.
Mashallah, mashallah. Very nice. Okay, so here. A Mushaddad ha. We have to join it to, tell me, darling. You still there, darling? Have we lost that student?
I'm sorry, can you say
Okay, so we've got this Mushaddad ha. Okay.
Yep.
And what will it join with?
The meme?
It will join with the meme because the Mushaddad letter always joins with the most recent vowel letter. And in this case, the ha and the meme are the joining letters. We ignore any stroke that's with the Mushaddad letter. We make it nice and simple. We do it step by step. So we make the sound mah.
Mah.
Well done. And then we bring this stroke into play. He.
He.
And then we join everything together. Mahi.
Mahi.
Mashallah. Here, then, we can read the whole thing. Famahili.
Famahili.
Mashallah. Very nice pressing down on that Mushaddad ha. Okay, last example here. We see there's a tashdid on top of the letter fa. We know that that's a Mushaddad letter. We know it's going to join with the most recent vowel letter. And what will that be in this case?
The Noon.
Well done. So the first step is to identify the joining sounds, but just to ignore any stroke on the Mushaddad letter. So let's do the joining. Naf.
Naf.
Well done. Then we make the sound that the stroke makes. Fa.
Fa.
And then we put everything together. Naf. Fa.
Nafa.
Well done. Here we then say the nafasa.
The Nafasa.
Mashallah. Very nice. Okay, really nice pressing down on the tashdid. Jazakumullah for helping out. Allah Hafiz for now. Inshallah, we'll hear from you again another time. Allah Hafiz, darling. Okay, so that is the rule. 4 simple steps. You have to recognize a tashdid, which is that small W sign. It sits on top of a letter. It causes joining. And we follow these 4 simple steps whenever we see tashdid. So we're going to move on to our practice. And today we're on Surat Al-Bayyinah. And Surat Al-Bayyinah also sits within part 30. It happens to be chapter number 98 out of the 114 that are in the Holy Quran. It has 9 verses, 1 ruku, and it was revealed in Medina. And although it's chapter number 98 within the Quran Majid, in terms of how it was revealed, the order of revelation was 100. So it was the 100th chapter to be revealed. Okay. Oops a daisy. So let's now go to here. Okay, so we will start here. If I may have a student to the mic.
Yes, G2142, please unmute yourself.
G2142, Assalamu alaikum. G2142, Assalamu alaikum. Okay, if you try somebody else, we can maybe come back.
They have unmuted.
They have. G2142, Assalamu alaikum.
I think we can't hear them.
No.
G2167, will you please unmute yourself?
G2167, Assalamu alaikum. G2167, Assalamu alaikum. G2167. Okay, we're not having any joy there. So if we can have somebody else.
G2168, will you please unmute yourself?
G2168.
Assalamualaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, darling. How are you?
Fine, thank you. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, very well. Jazakumullah, darling, for asking. Okay, sweetheart. So let's start, as we always do, before we recite Quran Majid, Dawood and Tasmiyah, please, and do it properly with recitation, with melody.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
Well done, Jazakumullah. Okay, darling. So let's now look at the first verse. Okay, so let's just have a quick look through and notice some of the rules that we need to apply. Okay, so we're going to join this meme and the lam because that's a sakin meme. 1 second timing. 1 second timing. Okay, there's the tashdid. Okay, now you learn tomorrow why we are going to ignore the alif. Okay, but for now, the letters that are going to join are the noon and the lam. Okay, when we join this, we're going to join it, first of all, the vowel letter with the mushaddad letter, we're going to make the sound. Then we're going to bring the fatha into play. Okay, and then we'll say nilla. Okay, so that's how we'll read that. Okay, so that's an example of the rule today. Here we have a sakin ya. There is a kasra beforehand. That is a ya mad. 2 second timing there. Okay, let me just clear up the screen a bit. 1 second timing. 1 second timing. 1 second timing. Here we have a waw mad. It's a waw mad because it's a sukoon on top of the vowel and there is a dhamma just beforehand. That means that there will be a 2 second timing there. Here we have a noon sakin. When we see a noon sakin, we always know that there will be some sort of nasal sound, but the nasal sound will depend on, can you tell me?
The ha.
Okay, the noon sakin will make a nasal sound and it will depend on the letter that comes next. What sound this noon makes depends on the letter that comes next. If the letter that comes straight afterwards is a letter of the throat, then we make what sort of sound on the noon? Can you remember? We taught this last week.
No.
Okay, not to worry. Okay, so when you see a noon sakin, always look at the next letter that carries a stroke. In this case, it happens to be an alif. Do you know if this alif is a letter of the throat?
It's not.
Okay, so last week we had a red grid. I was the week before actually we introduced it, and on there were some letters. Was alif on that red grid?
I don't think so.
Okay, so alif is one of those throat letters. Okay, so you'll have to revise that grid. Okay, go back. We posted all of the material on the WhatsApp group. Have a look. Okay, I haven't got it on my screen at the moment, but alif happens to be one of the throat letters. If there's a throat letter that comes after a noon sakin, then the sound that we make on the noon sakin is just a plain simple n sound, min. Okay, and that's why I'm not going to make any sort of prolonged sound on the noon. Okay, so here we have a lam sakin, and when we were talking about combining words, we said that we have to work backwards and join with a voweled letter. So it will be those two that join. We will not read the alif in between. 2 second timing on there. Again, a lam sakin, we work backwards until we find a voweled letter. So we're going to join those. We're not going to read the alif in between. Okay. Ya mad, because there's a kasra just beforehand. 2 second timing. Here is a noon sakin. So far, the only rule that we've taught you when it comes to noon sakin is look at the next letter. If it's a letter of the throat, then you do a clear noon sound. Tell me, the next letter, what is that letter?
Fa.
Fa. Is fa a letter of the throat? Can you remember?
No.
Okay. Yes, that's right. Okay, so I take it that that was the answer you were giving me. That is not a letter of the throat, and that would be the right answer. Fa is not a letter of the throat. So the sound that we make is going to be a slight nasal sound. We will come to this rule in upcoming lessons. Here we have a tashdid. So we will apply that rule today, okay? The rule of tashdid being that when you see a tashdid letter, ignore any stroke that's on there. Just join it to the most recent voweled letter. The most recent voweled letter happens to be this fa. So we'll say fa. And then we bring the stroke into play, which happens to be a kasra, but we always got to keep an eye out at what's coming. And it happens to be this ya sakin, which means that there's a ya mad. This kasra and that ya sakin cause a ya mad to come into play. So instead of saying ki, we'll say ki for 2 seconds. So when we come to here, I will read this as fakki. Okay, making sure that I press down on the gaff. Okay, similarly here, there is a tashdid. We'll play the same rule. Okay, we will identify that the mushaddad ta is going to join with this voweled letter, and we will read that hat. And then we will notice the vertical fatha, and we'll say da for 2 seconds. Then we'll bring it all together and we'll say hat da. Okay. This alif is not an alif mad, even though there is a fatha just beforehand. Why? Because it's not a blank alif. It has a sukoon on the top. We will teach you soon enough, but the sound we make here is the. This is not an alif mad. Here we have a tashdid. Again, we will use the same 4 steps. We will say that there's a ya here, a mushaddad ya. Let's just join it to the most recent vowel letter, which happens to be this ba. Bay. Then we will notice that the ya carries a kasra and we'll say yi. And then we will put it together, bayi. When we come to the end, there are rules that come into play when we pause. And at the end of this week, actually, we will come to this rule, but we don't always read what we're seeing. So, having gone through that verse, let's now have a read, okay? Lam yakunil ladhina.
Lam yakunil lazina
Kafaru.
kafaru.
Lam yakunil ladhina kafaru.
Lam yakunil lazina kafaru.
Mashallah, okay? There's a zamma there, okay? So it's ku. Okay. From here. Min ahlil kitabi.
Min ahlil kitabi.
Okay. Try and smile when we do this, yeah? Tabi.
kitabi.
Okay, it's a thin sound, darling. Okay, so if you smile when you come to thin letters, it's a better recitation, a better reading. Okay, so let's put it together from here. Lam yakunil ladhina kafaru min ahlil kitabi.
Lam yakunil lazina kafaru min ahlil kitabi.
Mashallah, really nice reading. So from here now, okay? Wal mushrikina.
Wal mushrikina.
Munfakina.
Munfakina.
Well done. Okay. So if you say the sound that a doorbell makes, ding dong, that sound that you make when you say ding dong, okay, try and make that sort of sound. Munfakina.
Munfakina.
Okay, so we'll practice on that sound, okay, when we come to it. Okay. Hatta.
Hatta.
Okay, so we just go back to hear this wa. Wal mushrikina munfakina hatta.
Wal mushrikina munfakina hatta.
From here, ta'tiyahumul bayyinah.
Ta'tiyahumul bayyinah.
Mashallah, really, really nice. Okay, here we say ta, just like a slight jerky sound. Ta.
Ta.
Well done. It's like you're having a hiccup. Okay, so that's the sort of sound we make. So let's now see if we can. It's a long verse, but let's have a go. Okay, from here to try and get to here. Okay, and if you need to take a breath in between, just do so. Okay, but here we go. Lam yakunil ladhina kafaru min ahlil kitabi wal mushrikina munfakina hatta ta'tiyahumul bayyinah. See how much you can do by yourself, darling.
Lam yakunil lazina kafaru min ahlil kitabi wal mushrikina munfakkarina hatta ta'timahumul bayyinah.
Mashallah, mashallah, very, very nice. Okay, Siha. So that was really, really good. Really nice, slow reading, exactly as it should be. Your eyes were following the letters and you were taking your time to make sure that you read what you saw. Okay, so just here, okay. Fakina.
Fakina.
Ta.
Ta.
Ta'tiya.
Ta'tiya.
Ta'tiyahumul.
Ta'tiyahumul
Bayyinah.
bayyinah.
Well done, yeah? So it's a na and a ha, and we just, it's almost as if you're spelling N-U-H, nah, okay? And that's how you would finish here. But by Thursday, inshallah, you'll understand why we do that. Really nice reading. You've got the makings of a really good reciter. Jazakumullah for coming to the mic. Allah Hafiz for now, darling.
Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz. If I can have another student on the mic.
Yes, G2169, will you please unmute yourself?
G2169, Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, darling. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, very well. Jazakumullah, darling, for asking. Okay, so we're going to read from here. But before we do, I'd like you to do Tawud and Tasmiyah, please.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
Well done. Okay, so let's have a talk of the verse from the Ra to the end of this verse here, okay? Wa mad. It's a Waw sakin with the Dhamma beforehand, 2-second timing, okay? we have a tanween here. When it's a tanween, you have to always look at the next letter because there will be a nasal sound. What nasal sound will depend on the next letter. So far, you only know the rule where if the next letter is a letter of the throat. So I want to ask you, is meme a letter of the throat? Yes? No?
Yes.
It is. Okay. So, Sriha, you will have to go back to the red grid that we introduced last week and the week before and have a look at it. And you'll find that meme is, in fact, not a letter of the throat. So the nasal sound that this then we will make will be lum. So that's how I'll read that. Okay. And I will explain this week, I think it is that rule. We will explain why we make that sort of sound. Okay, so that mushaddad meme will join in that sort of a way. Okay, let's look at this tashdid here on the lam. Okay, mushaddad lam, it needs to join with a voweled letter, the most recent voweled letter. The most recent voweled letter happens to be here. This noon and this lam are going to join. And the way we do it is the simple step of just joining the two letters, null. And then when we've done that, we look at the stroke on the mushaddad letter and we play that, bring that into play. And that's a vertical fatha. So we say la for 2 seconds. When we join it all together, this will be null. Okay. Mushaddad wow, sakin wow, dhamma beforehand, that is a wow mud. 2 second timing. Okay, tanween. Whenever you see a tanween, you look at the next letter because the nasal sound depends on the next letter. The meme, as we saw here, is not a letter of the throat. And so the sound that we make, you will learn later on this week, is fam. Okay, and then here there's a tashdid. We use the 4 steps that we talked about earlier. We look at the mushaddad letter and the letter that it's going to join with happens to be here. We make those 2 letters join. Toh. Then we look at the stroke on the mushaddad letter and we bring that into play. Ha. And then we read the whole thing. Toh ha. Toh ha. Okay. And then when we end, here, we're going to pause, and there is a rule which will cause us to read differently to how it's written. And we'll say rah. Okay. Let's now go back and do a read of this verse, okay? So we start from here. Rasulun minallahi yatlu suhufam mutahharah.
Rasulun minallahi yatlu suhufan mutahharah.
Mashallah, really nice, okay? Try and make this ta slightly thicker and heavier, darling. Round your mouth and lift up your tongue as you do it. Ta.
To.
Well done. Okay, so let's move on to here, okay? 2 second timing here because it's a ya mad. 2 second timing here, that's an alif mad, okay? We see a tanween, we look at the next letter. Is it a letter of the throat? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, so this is why we asked everybody to memorize those letters that were on that grid, okay? Qaf is not one of those letters, okay, that are from the throat. So the nasal sound that we make here is not going to be a simple bun. It's going to be boom. And that's why I'm going to read it that way, because this qaf is what's going to decide the nasal sound on here. Okay, so it's really important that everybody, if they don't know them, goes back and memorizes that red grid. Okay, there's a tashdid here. It's sitting on top of the ya. So we're going to join. Let's join with the most recent vowel letter here, and we'll ignore any stroke on the mushaddad letter. Qay, qay. And then we are going to look at the stroke on the mushaddad letter, yi. Then we bring it together and we say qayyi, and then when we finish, we don't always read as it's written because there are rules of pausing. Okay, so when we read here, we read فيها كتب قيمة.
فيها كتب قيمة.
Well done. That's a Zama there, darling, yeah? كتب قيمة.
كتب قيمة.
Okay, so let's just work here, okay? قي. قي.
قيمة.
Well done. قيمة.
قيمة.
Well done. فيها كتب قيمة.
فيها كتب قيمة.
Okay, so there's a Dhamma here. The sound that Dhamma makes is tu, okay, for this letter. There is no kasra. When you've read it twice, you've read that as a kasra, okay? That's a Dhamma, so you have to say tu. So make sure you follow with the eyes as well, okay? Okay, otherwise, really good reading, really nice pronunciation, okay? Just make sure that on here, you do a thick and heavy sound. Okay, Jazakumullah, Allah Hafiz for now.
جزاك.
Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to go to the letters of the day and we'll come back to the text, inshallah. The letters of the day, I'll just clear up my screen a little bit here. Okay, the letters of the day, we have 3 letters today. The first letter is this one here with 2 dots. The way to pronounce it properly is reading it for 5 seconds. So it would be da, da. In everyday speak, we'll just say da. But if you are asked to pronounce it properly, then that's how it's said out, okay? Da. Notice it has 2 dots. There are other letters that also have 2 dots. So you need to be able to recognize that this one here, okay, the shape underneath the 2 dots. And if you notice, it's the first part of the shape that's been taken before it joins into another letter. The 2 dots are on the top. When it's in the middle of a word, the way that it's written is as if like you're taking a pen and you're coming into the letter and then you're going out of the letter. And that's why it looks like a bend, because you're just joining a pen stroke and going into the next letter. So you notice that this there can join to the previous letter and it can also join to the next letter. It looks like this when it starts a word, like this when it's in the middle of a word, and like this when it's at the end of a word. This letter is known as a ta marbuta, and it makes the same sound as a ta, okay? And that's what ta marbuta looks like. Okay, the way to pronounce this is to take the tip of your tongue and make it touch the junction between the front 2 upper teeth and the gums. So just imagine the front 2 upper teeth, the gums where they join, that's where the tip of your tongue has got to touch. Da, and that's the way to make that sound. The next letter is lam. Again, a letter that's sounded out for 5 seconds when read out properly. It has no dot and it can join to the previous letter as well as the next letter, as you can see from here. Okay. The really important thing to notice is that this lam can join to the letter before and it can join to the letter afterwards. And often people get confused between a lam and an alif. But an alif never ever joins to the next letter, never. So even though this is a straight line and you might be thinking, oh, it might be an alif, it can't because it's joining. An alif would never join onto another letter. Okay, so that's one of the ways that you can identify that you're reading a lam. When it's at the end of a word, it's written just like it is when it's written on its own. How to pronounce it? Well, I've just explained to you how to read the letter ta. Okay, when you do the lam, you take the tip of your tongue and you touch the area just behind the area where the ta is made, okay? So instead of taking the tip of your tongue and touching the gums and the teeth where they join, you take the tongue slightly back. Lam, lam. And the last letter that we're going to do is this. Again, a letter that's sounded out for 5 seconds. Noon. It has one dot, and when it is written as part of words, it can join into a word, and it can join, a letter can join into it, and it can join into another letter. This is how it looks at the beginning. It's just the first part of the shape has been taken, and the dot has been placed on the top. There are other letters with one dot, for example, a ba, but that one dot is underneath on that letter. So it's really important that you know that the noon will have the dot on the top. When it's in the middle here, it's like as if you're writing with a pen. You're leading into the letter and then you're going out again. So that's why this looks like a bend. When it's at the end, it looks essentially just like it does when it's written on its own. The way to pronounce it properly is you take the tip of your tongue, and you've just learned how a lam is pronounced, okay? So where the tongue touches on the lam, the noon, the tongue will touch just behind that in your mouth. The tip of your tongue will touch the area just behind the area of lam on the hard gums. Noon. So the three letters are ta, lam, noon. And for your homework this evening, we would like you to run your finger over these letters, okay? And make sure that you can do that, because that's a really good way of being able to understand how to recognize these letters when you see them. Okay, let's now go back to our reading. If I can have a student on the mic, please.
G2175, please unmute yourself.
G2175, Assalamu alaikum. G2175, Assalamu alaikum. Okay, if we can have somebody else.
G2182, please unmute yourself.
G2182, Assalamu alaikum. G2182.
Assalamualaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam, darling. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, very well. Jazakumullah for asking, darling. Okay, sweetheart. So before we start, Tawud and Tasmiyah properly with melody, please.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
Well done. Okay. MashaAllah. Okay. Alif Mad. We're going to do 2 seconds there, okay? There is a tashdid here. That's a mushaddad ra. It will join with a vowed letter, which happens to be here. The first step is going to be, we ignore any stroke on the mushaddad letter. We just join the two letters that are going to join. Far.
Far.
Well done. Then we will look at the stroke on the mushaddad letter and we'll say ra.
Ra.
Well done. Very nice reading there. And then we do the last step, which is to bring it together. Farra.
Farra.
Well done. Here, there's a tashdid sitting on top of the lam. So the first thing we've got to do is find the vowel letter it's going to join with. It's going to be this one here, okay? And we just join the two letters together, this one and this one. We ignore the stroke to start off with. We make life easy. Qal.
Qal.
Well done. Then we say the stroke. La.
La.
Qalla.
Qalla.
Well done. Ya mad, 2 second timing. Okay. Waw mad, 2 second timing. We have a lam sakin here. the rule that we taught you last week was that a sakin letter always joins with the most recent mutaharik letter, the most recent vowel letter. We just work backwards. We work backwards and we keep working backwards until we find a vowel letter. So darling, tell me, what will join with this lam sakin? Which of these letters here will join?
Ta.
Well done. Yes, it's this one because that's the most recent mutaharik letter. So we will join those. 2-second timing here. We have a tashdid on the lam. So we're going to follow the simple steps of we identify the mushaddad letter and the vowel letter that is going to join, il. Then we're going to bring the stroke on the mushaddad letter and we're going to say that. Okay. Now here, there is a fatha on there, but we've always got to keep our eyes on what's coming up. And there's an alif. When you see an alif straight after a fatha, that is an alif mad. So we don't just say la, we say la for 2 seconds. When we read here, we say illa. Okay.
Illa.
Mashallah. Okay. So again, this is one of those rules that we'll inshallah come to. But there is this small meme written here, okay? When we come and when we're reading, if we see this meme, we don't read the noon, we read the meme, okay? The meme is there to remind you. There are rules in Arabic grammar which mean that you have to read the meme instead of the noon, but the noon is still written. So we'll say mim ba. Okay, we're going to do the meme here and we're going to blend into the ba. So when we read here, we won't read the noon, we'll read the meme. Mim ba.
Memba.
Well done. Okay, this is an ayn ba.
Ba.
Well done. Okay, we will work on the ayn side. Okay, and inshallah we'll explain what's going on here in an upcoming lesson. Alif mad, 2 seconds. Okay, this is also an alif mad. It would normally be 2 seconds. And we will explain soon enough, but this symbol here is going to tell us to stretch this sound up for a bit longer than just 2 seconds, okay? Which is why I'm going to read it for longer. Okay, so we move on. This lam will join with this meme, okay? And then there's a tashdid here. We'll use the 4 steps. We'll say the ya mushaddad joins with this ba, and we say bay. Then we'll say the ya has a kasra, and we say yi. And then we'll put it together. Bayyi.
Bayi.
Well done. And we're going to pause here. And so we're not going to read exactly as we see it here. Okay, so having gone through that verse, let's now read from here, okay? وَمَا تَفَرَّقَ الَّذِينَ
وما تفرق الذين
أوتوا الكتاب
أوتوا الكتاب
إلا من بعد
إلا من بعد
ما جاءت
ما جاءت
هم البينة.
هم البينات.
Okay, this is a noon. Okay, and we're going to, even though that's a ta, okay, as you see it, there is a rule which will come to on Thursday, actually, on Thursday. And when we read this, because we're going to pause, read it as a N-U-H, that sound, nah.
Nah.
Well done. Okay, so let's do the whole verse if you can, yeah? So deep breath. وَمَا تَفَرَّقَ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ إِلَّا مِن بَعْدِ مَا جَاءَتْهُمُ الْبَيِّنَةُ. Have a go, darling.
وما تفرق الذين أوتوا الكتاب إلا من بعد ما جاءتهم هم البينات.
Okay.
Nah.
Well done, well done. Okay, so I know our eyes are seeing a ta, and so we automatically want to say that. But inshallah, all will become clear. Okay, okay. So here, when you read here, you did this slightly longer than 2 seconds. Okay, when you do practice, make sure you pay attention that that is only for 2 seconds. Okay,
Okay.
and when you join the hamza here to the ta, at, don't do any sort of bounce. Don't say atta. Okay, it's just at. At. Well done. Okay, sweetheart. Jazakumullah for your time. Allah Hafiz for now. Okay, so we were going to, today's schedule was to read it up to here. So Alhamdulillah, we've stuck to that. Okay, and inshallah, tomorrow we'll finish this chapter. But for now, I will read so that you have one full recitation up to here. Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لم يكن الذين كفروا من أهل الكتاب والمشركين منفكين حتى تأتيهم البينة رسول من الله يتلو صحفا مطهرة فيها كتب قيمة وما تفرق الذين أوتوا الكتاب إلا من بعد ما جاءتهم البينة. And when you practice, try and take it slowly and pay attention to all the rules that we've taught you, as well as all the ones that you may already know, and keep your eye on what you're seeing. Okay, so let's now go on to our homework for today, which is practicing Surah Al-Bayyinah, verses, chapter number 98, verses 1 to 5. We will fix this and send that out to the parents on the WhatsApp group. Pay particular attention to how you're going to deal with mushaddad letters. That was our rule today. But of course, apply all the rules that you know, including all the ones that we've covered so far. Use the PDF that we supply or your own Quran. And the 3 letters, ta, lam, noon. Okay, do go through the PDF that we supply. Or if you've got a copy of the Talimul-Quran, the book, you can look at pages 37 and 39 and you'll find the same material there. Follow your fingers, trace your fingers over the letters. It's quite important. We are going through the letters on a daily basis because these are things that will help you in the long run. For those of you who don't know your throat letters, please do go back and revisit. And I'll see if I can post that grid again on the group just to remind everybody. Okay, so if I can have a student on the mic for the closing dua.
Yes, G2184, please unmute yourself.
G2184, Assalamu alaikum.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम।
Wa alaikum salam, darling. How are you?
मैं ठीक हूँ, आप कैसी हैं?
Alhamdulillah, very well. Jazakallah for asking, darling. So, sweetheart, we're going to read this dua, okay? Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
اللهم ارحمني بالقرآن العظيم
اللهم ارحمني بالقرآن العظيم.
And the English translation.
Oh Allah, have mercy on me through the Quran the Great.
MashaAllah. Jazakumullah Starling for coming to the mic and doing a lovely recitation. Inshallah, we've taught something today and everyone has benefited. And for now, until tomorrow, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.